Plunging into the thick jungles of our continents requires great courage, or great ignorance of the dangers that lie deep within these palaces of the wildest and most violent nature of our planet. For centuries, those who venture into these places find more than just beautiful scenery. Most of them are traumatized for life, and others don't even manage to get out of it. The jungle is a huge tomb for many adventurers, and today we are going to show you why. If you're willing to follow us into the heart of the creepy, you'll discover the dangers hidden in these meadows of nature, plus the stories of hundreds of people who visited the jungle, but something suddenly went wrong. Terribly wrong. Ready for this trip? Then get comfortable, because it's time to begin. They visited the jungle, but something went terribly wrong. Number 5. The Banshee Bay Massacre. The dangers of the jungle aren't limited to the creatures that prowl its spaces, but extend to humans who have found their homes among these vast territories. Tribes of all origins continue to inhabit the jungle and attack anyone who dares to invade its spaces. Although today many of these tribes have accepted to maintain a cordial and communicative relationship with outsiders, it was very different in 1878, especially after the Banshee Bay Massacre. In that year, Reverend George Brown sent a group of missionaries to Papua New Guinea. 4 men of faith went to that remote region to preach their faith. They quickly earned the hatred of the ancient Tote tribe. Some accounts describe the missionaries as arrogant and unable to see the natives as anything more than savages. This would have been the trigger for the massacre. The tribal leader gave the order and the 4 missionaries were killed. Some even suggest that their flesh was eaten, and this tribe was cannibalistic, and it's believed that their bones were left in the sun for the carrion to feed on. In retaliation, Reverend Brown burned the village and killed at least 10 people, increasing the death toll and bloodshed of a massacre that is still remembered even in our days. In fact, in 2003, the Totai tribe formally apologized for the acts committed in the past, even though Reverend Brown wasn't charged for his violent murders. Number 4. The Feast of the Cannibals. Another story of similar nature can be found in the Fiji Islands, a place that Europeans avoided at all costs in the 1859s, as this island was under the dominion of numerous cannibal tribes. However, despite the warnings, the Methodist Reverend Thomas Baker went there, with the divine purpose of leading the man of that place on the right path. Amazingly, Thomas and his 7 disciples survived more than 8 years on the main island of the country, called Viti Levu. His progress was significant in those years. The tribes welcomed him, but then, when he tried to convert the tribal leader into a believer of his faith, he made the mistake of giving wrong signals with his actions. One of the worst was to touch the chief's head, a sign the natives interpreted as an insult and a threat. A cumulative tension of 8 years ended that day. Thomas and his followers were brutally murdered, and their flesh was served as food for the tribes. However, time instilled fear in the inhabitants of this region, who came to believe that this act unleashed a curse upon them. For this reason, 11 descendants of Thomas Baker visited the island in 2003 at the request of the natives to receive a formal apology, all in the hope of eradicating the curse. Number 3. A Journey of No Return. Oliver Pellis Tompkins and James Chalmers starred in another one of the creepiest stories of the record. Both were only 23 years old, but they possessed a blind faith that led them to become Congregationalist missionaries destined for the island of Goribari, known for its intense cannibalism. Despite adversity, the two managed to travel through much of Papua New Guinea in 1901, including the islands of Goribari until they reached the Along Ard River. Tompkins kept a record of every place they visited, but it all ends at the river. Apparently, about 20 canoes of the local tribes blocked the advance of the small vessel in which the missionaries were being transported. The ship was boarded for 3 hours. The tribal chiefs inspected every nook and cranny of the ship and tried to persuade them to go ashore. The missionaries promised that they would visit the village the next day. With that promise, the natives left. The following day, Tompkins and Chalmers kept their promise. Sadly, when they set foot on land, They were brutally murdered and their flesh was served at the table of the island's tribal chief. Number 2. An unwelcome visit. There are untimely visits, but not compared to that of John Williams and James Harris, two missionaries who had been spreading Christianity throughout the South Pacific for more than 20 years. And they landed in Vanuatu, known as the New Hebrides, in 1839. The missionaries believe they will be well received, as their experience in the region had been beneficial and enjoyable. But what they didn't know was that the night before, a group of European traders transporting sandalwood had murdered a group of locals. This was crucial. The tribal leaders saw the foreigners as a threat, and without reason or motive, they decided to punish Williams and James without allowing them to prove their innocence. James was beaten to death, while Williams managed to reach the shore before 10 arrows ended his life. Their corpses were eaten and their bones are part of an old museum on the island. Number 1. Missing persons. Perhaps one of the most catastrophic and grisly expeditions in British history was led by Sir John Franklin and his crew of 134 men, who set out in 1845 aboard HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, two mighty ships that were to have sailed through the Northwest Passage of the Arctic, only to meet their demise. The group was led by a strict man who didn't allow the consumption of alcohol or the slightest rebellion. He was also extremely cautious. His record showed absolute excellence and great control over the ocean and navigation. However, the skills of this captain weren't enough to avoid chaos. The ships disappeared without a trace. There were no clues to follow, not even the scouts managed to spot any hint of their whereabouts, and the search missions also failed to find any trace of the ships. Even so, only with time has it been discovered that this expedition was probably forced to stop on the shores of the Arctic due to inclement weather or unexpected vessel failures. There, an ancient Greenlandic tribe may have served as hosts before deciding to devour them. The evidence for this lies in the multiple human remains and bones scattered around the area. Each of them is found with injuries that clearly indicate a violent altercation. Not a single crew member of these vessels survived the expedition. The ships simply disappeared, as did the men, and even today it remains one of the greatest mysteries on record. Of course, this isn't the first time an exploration mission has ended in a fateful situation. History is full of them, and there are islands that many would rather not even hear the name of, as it offers such chilling dangers that it's better not to think about them. However, if you aren't one of those people who are afraid of the unknown and would like to continue learning the secrets of other places where many people enter but never return home, you'd better join us in the following videos and witness the world that hides beyond the reality of our cities. Are you ready? Then here are the videos.